Welcome to our look at Boolean conditions and Boolean expressions. Today we're going to explore a little bit more about how we look at Boolean commands and how we can work with them within Python. So as we talked about before, remember that Boolean is a data type that can return one of two different options. Either something is true or something is false. And so it has to be checking some of those different conditions. So as we looked at last time, let's look at an example where a condition might be true or false. So in the example that we have up here, now we're asking it to print so that we can actually see the output of what this variable is going to return, whether that's true or false. And we have the question, 3 is less than 6. And so we know that, yeah, 3 is in fact less than 6. So if we run it, we should expect to see true. And that is what's output here on the right-hand side. So let's try a couple more. So what if we said print 12 does not equal or is not equal to 10? Remember, these are some of the different operators that we've been using so far, some of the different comparison operators. And so in this case, 12 does not equal 10. Well, yeah, 12 doesn't equal 10, so if I wanted to kind of run that, let's see what happens. We get true once again. So let's see now if we try to create an expression that might give us false. So remember that not only can we compare numbers, but we can also compare other things like strings. For example, what if I tried to compare the string tree and to the string apple? Now remember that when we're comparing these ones here, that we want to remember to check to see if they are equal. We actually need the double equal sign because a single equal sign is more of an assignment operator, or we're assigning a value to something else. So we should be able to tell that no, the word tree is not the same as the word apple. So if I run that, we see that it's going to return the value of false. Now we also were exploring a little bit last time about how we can actually chain, or we can combine some of these different commands too. So for example, what happens if I wanted to say, okay, well, what if I'm comparing 3 is less than 5, which we know it is, so that should return true. But I'm also going to use the keyword and to check to see if 8 is also greater than 9. Now in this example, 3 is less than 5, yes, that will return true, but is 8 greater than 9? No, that would return false. So we actually have a true and a false statement being returned here. But our key word there in the middle, and, means that both expressions have to be true for it to return true. And because 8 is not greater than 9, because that one expression is false, that means when we run this, we're going to get the command false, or we're going to get the response or the return of false. Okay, so let's see how this works then with other things. Well, we explored before that when we are printing Boolean commands, if a Boolean encounters a number 0, then it's going to interpret it as false, and 1 or any other number, it's going to interpret it as true. But what happens if I just say print 0? Give a second to think about that. Is this going to return false, or what is it going to print on the screen? Well, it's actually going to print 0, because when I just have a number in there, it's actually treating it like an integer. And so it's just printing that integer. It's not considering it like a Boolean statement. And in order to kind of wrap that, in order to encapsulate that within a Boolean command, I need to give it that keyword bool, and then surround what I want to make a Boolean in those brackets. So right now, this is going to now return the Boolean value of 0, as opposed to treating 0 just like an integer. So if I run that, now is where I get that response of false. Okay, well, let's try something else. For example, what happens if I try the Boolean response of a string? So now I want to take the Boolean response of toy. Well, remember that anytime we have a data type that has something in it, whether that be a number or whether that be a string or a list, that if it contains something in it and we try to return that as a Boolean type, then we're going to get the value of true. And we see that's the case here as well. Okay, well, let's start looking at what would happen if we started adding in different variables to what we're trying to do. So for example, what happens if I set some variables equal to certain values? So let's say x equals 14, we'll do y equals 9, and then in this case, I want to print the comparison between these two variables. So print x is greater than y. Well, give that some thought to think about what that might return. X, remember, is given the value or assigned the value of 14. Y is assigned the value of 9. So when we're actually comparing them, even though we're comparing variables, we're really comparing the number 14 to the number 9. And it's asking us, is 14 greater than 9? And yes, it is. So that should return true. And in fact, it does for us. Okay, so let's get a little more complicated here. So we're going to kind of keep our first same variables, but let's assign them some different values. Let's say the value 5 and the value 6. But now we're going to use a conditional statement, or we're going to use this conditional return statement in order to allow us to work with if statements. And this is one instance where we oftentimes see these conditional return statements being used. So I could say if x equals 6, then I want it to print hello. However, else, so in other words, if x does not equal 6, that's the, or any other situation where x does not equal 6, well then I want it to print world. So in this situation, we're actually using whether that condition is true to determine what we're going to print. Now you'll notice I didn't use my y expression here. That's fine. We don't always have to use variables even when we assign it to it. But I'm checking to see if the number, or if the value inside of the variable x equals 6. And if we look actually to where we were defining it, we see that it actually equals 5. So it's not. So that would return false. And whenever this conditional statement returns false, that means it's not going to do what's there. It's not going to print hello, and we can expect this to print world instead. Let's run this to verify that that's the case. And yeah, we do. We see that it prints the word world instead of printing the word hello. Okay, well let's try another situation where we might sometimes use Boolean conditions in order to determine a looping condition. And in this case, we're going to look at a while loop. So I'm going to start by defining, or by assigning, the number 1 to my variable x. And then we're going to say while x is, so while my variable is less than 4. So I'm creating a condition where I'm going to be continually checking this case. And basically, as long as it is true, the while loop will happen. And then once we've done what's in the while loop, then it'll go back to the top and it'll check that condition again. And if it's true, it'll do it. And then it'll check, and then it'll do it, and it'll check. Now, we have to be very careful with using things like this, because let's just put something fun here, like I'm feeling loopy, dealing with loops. And so we have to be very careful, because if I were to run this code right now, we would be stuck in an infinite loop. X equals 1. And we would check, is x less than 4? Yes. Print I'm feeling loopy. Is x less than 4? Yes. X will always be less than 4. And so we have to be careful here, and we have to make sure that we are putting things in place so that at some point in time, x will no longer be less than 4. And so what I'm going to do here is, after my print command, I'm going to put x plus equals 1. And what this does is this allows us to be able to increment, or to increase, the value of x every time we run that. So the first time we run this code through, x equals 1. Is x less than 4? Yes. Print I'm feeling loopy. Now, x is going to be equal to 2. Is that still less than 4? Yeah. Print I'm feeling loopy again. Now x is going to be 3. Is that less than 4? Yeah. Print I'm feeling loopy again. Now x is 4. Is 4 less than 4? No, it's not. We've just returned false in that statement, and now we've broken out of that while loop. So let's verify to make sure that that runs the proper amount of times that we want it to run. I'm feeling loopy, I'm feeling loopy, I'm feeling loopy. And if you wanted to see the value of 4, I'm going to actually, or the value of x, sorry, I'm going to actually add some extra commands in here where I'm going to print the value of x. But what's interesting is I'm going to print it twice. I'm going to print it before we increment it and after, so you can see the change. So you'll see it's 1. Then we say I'm feeling loopy, we increment it's a 2. Then we check, is that less than 4? Yes. I'm feeling loopy, now it turns to a 3. Is that less? Yes. I'm feeling loopy, now we turn it to a 4, it checks again, and it's done. And so this is some of the examples and some of the different ways in which we can use Boolean statements in order to check values of things, to check whether things are true or false, or even to allow us to better handle if statements and while loops.